White Sox fans, welcome in to Sunday Funday with Sox on Tap. Coming at you after an eventful week of White Sox baseball. It's Johnny Nani alongside my guy, NWI Steve. How you doing this Sunday afternoon/evening, me friend?
Hey, yo, Jonathan, I'd be doing better if the Sox wouldn't have found a way to snatch a defeat from the jaws of victory, but this is where we are. Other than that, all good, my man.
Yep. Like I said, eventful week of White Sox baseball that just went down. Steve, it might not always be good, but you can't say that Sox ever give us a shortage of things to talk about. We've got a loaded docket coming up for you here on this Sunday Funday edition of Sox on Tap. Obviously, there was some historic futility going on. Feels like that's a running theme this season, but we'll discuss that and then the snapping of that skid with the series split against the Boston Red Sox this weekend. Some prospect news. We got a big arm coming up from the minors. We'll get into that. Talk about, it's trade rumor season. The hot stove is starting to crank back up. So we'll discuss a few White Sox players involved in those discussions. And as usual, take a look at our next series. That'll be a 4-gamer coming up in Seattle. Before we do any of that, make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube, On Tap Sportsnet there. Give us a follow on the socials at Sox On Tap and at On Tap Sportsnet. And check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Steve, let's jump in. Starting off this weekend series in terrible fashion. It was the 14th consecutive loss, setting the franchise record, and just in embarrassing fashion. What allowed 14 runs, 24 hits. That was by far the low point of the season.
14 runs allowed in a franchise record-setting streak of futility, 14th consecutive loss, as you mentioned there. Embarrassing is really the only word that you can truly use to describe this entire situation, to be in a spot where you lose your 14th consecutive game and to have it happen in that fashion. It's just another kick to the rocks, as if having 13 consecutive losses coming into that game wasn't bad enough, especially 2 games that had directly preceded it, going the way they did when you had sizable leads and you gave them both away, and then to just go out there, get back on your home field, and just get, kicked in the nuts right out of the chute. I mean, that's so White Sox in 2024, and everybody involved in this situation here should be thoroughly embarrassed. Every person in that organization, from the top all the way down, to be in a spot where you set a franchise record for futility. I can't stress enough how embarrassed everybody in this organization should be.
Yep. Steve, I don't know if you recall, during the Minnesota series back in, I want to say it was April, there was a White Sox fan on the road up in Minnesota, and he was keeping a scorebook, and he was wearing a nice throwback White Sox jacket and hat and all of that. And I believe it was Chris Emma, I want to say, from radio, that had taken a screenshot of that and said, everyone in the White Sox organization should go to work every day knowing that they disappoint this guy. And that is literally the encapsulation of it, based on, all that stuff that you just said there. I just wanted to add that because that thought came back to my mind after seeing that again. It really is thoroughly embarrassing. And you put something together previously about, I saw just a few takes on various social media platforms that it's, well, if we're going to be bad, why not root for, make it his, tailspin totally out of control in the worst possible. Please just refresh on why we don't want to see that. I mean, obviously, besides the wins losses aspect of it, but go ahead.
Because there's nothing positive that can come from this being the worst team in Major League history. Due to the changes in the draft rules as a result of the last CBA, it's been well documented this team is not going to be able to pick higher than 10th in the draft. In a 2025 draft class that is loaded relative to the one that is coming up here in a couple of weeks. And so they're not going to get the benefit of the quote unquote tanking, and being historically bad from the chance of being able to draft a generational talent. But moreover, this loud crescendo that exists within a portion of the fan base about, don't go to the games. If you continue to go to the games, all you're doing is telling Jerry Reinsdorf that you are okay with what is happening. But at the end of the day, if this team loses 130 games and if attendance, drops down to, 10, 12,000 a game, all it's going to do is hurt us, the people that really care about this team in the long run, because that's just going to give more ammunition to Jerry Reinsdorf to not go out and invest in this team and try to turn this thing around. Because if fan apathy continues to get to a point where ratings continue to go down and attendance at the ballpark continues to go down, I don't know what people think is going to happen here. I don't know why people think that all of a sudden, when the calendar flips to November 1st, he's just going to be like, okay, you know what? Now I really need to focus and try to bring in some better talent here to make this thing better. I don't know what rock these people are living under, but if this thing gets really, really bad, there's a good chance it's going to stay that way for quite a while because he won't have any incentive to fix it.
He's set in his ways. That's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, he's set in his ways. You see it how the Bulls are operated. You see it how the White Sox are operated. And it's going to stay the same because Jerry, that's what he does. So I agree with your sentiment there. That's a post over at ontapsportsnet.com. So, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So let me address this here. So for anybody that is not, able to see this in video form right now, a frequent loud mouth breathing commenter, Ken WO in here in the comments saying that Jerry's going to give $150 million to my guy, Tony Tater's Anthony Santander. A couple things with this here. First and foremost, Anthony Santander is not going to get $150 million in the free agent market this winter. Secondly, he's actually the type of guy I could see the Sox bringing in over the course of this winter. He's, left-handed hitter, has been good defensively in right field at various points, does hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I don't think he's going to be someone that is going to be real cost prohibitive within this really weak free agent market that is out there. Now, obviously the idea of, someone having to want to sign with the White Sox is a discussion point all in itself here. But Anthony Santander is actually the type of guy that I could really see the Sox targeting over the course of this winter. And, if he comes here and doesn't immediately get that stink of the White Sox signing a free agent that we've seen all too often with guys like Adam Dunn, Adam LaRoche, and a host of others that when they put on that uniform, all of a sudden just lose any semblance of their abilities.
Turn into a pumpkin. Yeah.
Right. There's things that Santander would bring to this club that would definitely be beneficial here. So I don't rule it out personally, but at $150 million, no fucking chance.
Yeah. I'm with you on that front. We'll see how that goes. But we got past the historic futility that Mark's setting it, all embarrassing, all that on Thursday. Friday, snap the streak. Steve Stone called it at the end of the broadcast on Thursday. It happened. Also something that you maybe foreshadowed a little bit, Steve. You wrote about Mr. Garrett Crochet over at ontapsportsnet.com. Pretty analysis heavy, especially pertaining to his pitch mix. Go ahead and tell us what you saw in his strong outing on Friday night that eventually set the stage for a White Sox 7-2 victory and snapping that horrendous losing streak.
Well, before I get to that, I think you need to give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back because you were in the ballpark in attendance for this one on Friday night. So some are saying
that is true
on the streets out there that you are actually responsible for fixing this problem, Jonathan.
Yeah. Me and our guy A. Kins here. We the first time that I made it out to the ballpark this year. Been a different setup this year, but I got out there and it was nice enjoying a Friday evening and taking in a win. Some fireworks along the way too, both during and after the game. So yeah, it was a good experience. But
that's always a plus right there. And then, look, as it relates to Garrett Crochet, one of the things I highlighted that morning in my piece before he took the mound was the way that he's really changed his approach and how he's going after hitters. He was very four-seam fastball slider heavy to start the season, and obviously going back to his time in the bullpen pitching for this team. But going back to April 13th on a Saturday afternoon start against the Cincinnati Reds, ever since then, there's been a really interesting intersection of his cutter usage and his slider usage, where the cutter has now served as his primary secondary offering there, and the slider has really taken a back seat to the rest of his arsenal here. And there have been several starts in there, and this is another thing I outlined, that his use of the changeup has actually outpaced his use of the slider for quite a while now. But I think that just incorporating that pitch, that cutter right there, giving hitters kind of a different look, and looking at those three offerings, the four seam, the cutter, and the slider within the velocity band with which they exist, there's enough variance there from a velocity standpoint and from a movement profile that they're really playing well off of each other. And I think it's a big part of the reason why we have seen Garrett Crochet have the success that he has had since that 3-start hiccup in late April, early part of May, as he's really gotten comfortable utilizing and featuring that cutter more frequently. It's been a dangerous pitch for him to have boring in on the hands of right-hand hitters, and it's just really complemented everything else he has in his arsenal.
Yeah, another double-digit strikeout game. I believe you racked up 10 in Friday's victory. And even you hear, you know what I like hearing, Steve? That's all great to know the data and know what's actually, breaking it down. But then when you hear the reaction, because when you talk to players of the other team and facing him, and he said, who is it? Duran said he's a fucking stud. That's what he said about Garrett Crochet, and was talking about the movement on those pitches, and then especially the velocity change that you had highlighted in your piece there. So that was joy to watch, and a nice treat for me on a Friday evening. And hey, shout out to John Cannon coming in, just recalled locking it down. Not his typical role, because he had been a starter obviously in AAA his first couple times out here, but he locked it down, and Sox offense was able to do enough with the long ball. Hey, the multi-home run strategy, Steve. We got 3 of them. It's great to see Luis Robert Jr. back too. That happened right before the Cubs series. We didn't get a show midweek, but great to see him first inning going golfing for that one out to dead center. And then Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn back to back for some insurance runs later in the game. I enjoyed it thoroughly watching those fireworks, Steve, and it's a very simple concept. Ball go far.
Team go ball far. Go far. The team will go far.
It's easy.
I mean, it checks out, and look, we haven't seen this team hitting the ball out of the ballpark with regularity this season. And for it to be on full display there Friday night when that happened, good things take place. And then you follow that up the next day, obviously, with Gavin Sheets hitting the grand slam there. Hitting the ball out of the ballpark is a good way to put your team in a solid position in the year of our Lord 2024 to win a baseball game. So much so that I would like to see the White Sox implement this strategy a little more frequently. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when people said the Sox hit too many home runs. Oh, I would like to go back to that, because those were fun times.
Yeah, right. Obviously, you get the fireworks there. The Sox are actually on a bit of a home run streak. Dating back to, what is it, finale in Milwaukee, I want to say that there's a home run streak going on. So let's keep that going as they go on the road and visit the Mariners this upcoming week. As you mentioned, Sheets, big blast with the grand slam on Saturday. That was nice to see. Felt like it'd been a long time since we had seen grand slam off the bat of a White Sox player, so that was good. Then we get into Sunday's game. I'm just going to go and throw Minidar's comment up here. Bad day managing for Griffoul. I mean, you could say that almost any day, but shit, Martin Maldonado up there in 2 different spots with runners in scoring position at crucial junctures of the game. You've got sloppy play in terms of errors, or just there's physical errors, right? Like the Mike Soroka dropping the ball and then misfielding the one behind the mound in the extras there. But then there's the mental errors too. Throwing to third base instead of hitting a cutoff man, letting the trailing run come up behind. It's all of this shit is just so White Sox. And that's why the title of this show is White Soxing to a series split. They very well should have won this series. Like you had said, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory.
Well, one of the things that we heard from Mr. Clean when he took the job during his introductory press conference was talking about how this team was going to play sound, fundamental baseball. And here we are now, almost a year and a half into this tenure, and they have been anything but to this point. The same mistakes, the things you talk about, throwing to the wrong bases, allowing guys to take 90 feet. How often have I stressed on this show the importance of taking things 90 feet at a time? When you give the opponent an inch, when you are short on talent, the way that the Sox are, they are going to make you pay. And we've seen that so much. We saw that so much during the course of the 14-game losing streak. And then you see it again here today, that when this team makes mistakes, the opposition capitalizes on them. And that's what you're supposed to do when you're playing against a dog shit team like the Sox are. Let's just call it what it is. They are not in any position to be making those simple fundamental mistakes. They have to play essentially clean, flawless baseball to put themselves in a position to be able to win games. And you see these things going on still, a year and a half into the tenure of Pedro Grifol, and it just goes to show that everything that he said during that introductory press conference, all the stuff we heard in Arizona, this winter leading up to the season, was complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah, insert the My Cousin Vinny clip. Excuse me, everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you. That's Mr. Grifol for you. All right, Steve, to round out this Boston series before we move on to our next topics here, a couple of marginal things probably won't show up too much in the box score, but we had mentioned on our show last week about Lenyn Sosa, Oscar Colas returning. It's almost put up or shut up time for these guys. And while, like I said, nothing extremely eye-popping, I think both of them look a little bit more comfortable. You had a few observations. Go ahead and share them.
Yeah, I think with Oscar Colas in particular, you look at some of the at-bats, even when he's working walks or even if he's having at-bats where he's, making outs, but having just more quality professional-like at-bats, taking pitches, getting himself into counts to potentially be able to have success, running counts deeper instead of just going up there and flailing at every pitch that he's seeing in there. So it looks like the approach has tightened up a little bit. Obviously, the results to this point haven't been great. He has taken some walks that have elevated that on-base percentage since coming back in this relatively small sample size here, but we're not seeing him really impact the baseball in terms of getting extra base hits or anything else like that. So it would be nice to see him display that level of plate discipline and strike zone management to put himself in a position to be dangerous at the plate, particularly with the extra base hits. And that's one of the things that, going back to when Tim Anderson was here, when he was at his best, this was a guy that never walked a lot, but when he got ahead in counts 2-0, 3-1, and put himself in fastball type counts to be able to do damage, he would do that consistently. And that's what we really need to start seeing out of Oscar Colas. As far as Lenyn Sosa goes, again, some improvement in his at-bats as well. Made a couple of nice defensive plays, particularly over at third base there. We've seen, obviously, more of Sosa than we have of Colas to this point. So there's a lot of bad taste in the mouth, so to speak, when it comes to watching Lenyn Sosa within the fan base here, because the results have not been good. So, hopefully you can maybe see some kind of development from him here in this most recent stint. It just visually has looked a little bit better, but again, we need to see more consistent results out of it here before anybody's really saying, hey, maybe this guy can at least be a utility player instead of a quad A guy.
That term that always gets thrown around, what is it? Sneaky power or occasional power. At least we did see one leave the yard in the series against the Cubs. And then I really enjoyed him taking that extra 90 feet on that ball to the left center gap that was fielded, cut off there. But he was on his, heads up the whole way looking for it and was able to get in there and sneak a double out of what historically for White Sox players would be a single, right? And then heads up play to take third base there. Unfortunately, not able to capitalize, but that's kind of stuff that you want to see, and that will keep him around a little bit longer and maybe curry a little bit more favor in his camp there. So that about does it. Wraps it up for that Boston series, as we mentioned. It's a split there. Actually, kind of shocked. We can get a midweek show, but I probably would have only predicted maybe one of this series. So I'm actually kind of surprised to go over my hindsight predictions there. All right. Getting into some storylines here. Luis Robert is back now, Steve, and it's that time of year. Trade deadline's coming up end of July, and his name has been thrown around a lot. White Sox entertaining offers. They're asking for X package, this package. We don't know exactly what will come down, and I doubt it's going to happen in June. Shit, even in the first 2 weeks of July, it'd probably be a little bit there. But thoughts on the prospect of trading Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet?
My thoughts on trading either one of these players have not changed from where they were at earlier on in the season. Before the season started here, shortly after the Dylan Cease trade, and everybody was just talking about, I might as well just trade Robert now at this point. I'm pushing back on that, and I will continue to push back on this. At the end of the day, this is a guy that does have superstar talent. And this is a team that has been devoid of superstar talent for quite a long time here. So the idea of just trading him and being in perpetual rebuild is not something that appeals to me in any way. With that being said, I do understand the dynamics of having Scott Boras as his agent now. And the fact of the matter is that he is not long to be in a White Sox uniform because of that fact. All of that being said, this team, in my opinion, still, and I put this in print, so my name is on it and I'm sticking with this. They've got 13 months to get this thing figured out. If by next July, this thing is not moving in a positive direction to the point where you think you could be the number 3 wild card team in 2026, then you give serious consideration to trading Luis Robert next July. But if at this point, 13 months from now, if you think you can be number 3 wild card in 2026, you hold on to Luis Robert and you take 2 shots with this thing. We've seen it happen each of the last 2 years. A number 3 wild card winning the pennant in the National League. It can happen. It seems really bleak right now. Understandably, this is more than likely the worst team in the history of the American League's charter franchise. And that says a lot. But, the Arizona Diamondbacks lost 110 games in 2021. And 2 years later, they were in the World Series. So it can happen. So my position will maintain you hold Luis Robert until next July. And as it relates to Garrett Crochet, and this is one of the things I wrote about earlier in the week, if this organization and the pitching infrastructure here, particularly Brian Bannister and Ethan Katz, you bring in Brian Bannister to oversee your entire pitching organization, working directly with Ethan Katz. If you trust them, if you believe in them and in what they are doing, and if they feel that Garrett Crochet can be a starter, you do not move him. He's 24 years old. The results that they have gotten to this point have been far exceeding of what anybody else, myself included, could have possibly anticipated from him. If you think he can be a starter, you hold on to him. And you even start to look at the idea of doing one of the, early arbitration extensions here, maybe trying to tack on a couple of years to his deal here. Because he has pitched like an ace, minus 3 starts in late April and early part of May. This is exactly the type of person you want leading your rotation if you think he can hold up. So if they know the answer to that question, if they know how they feel as it relates to Garrett Crochet, if they don't think he can hold up, then I understand moving him. But if you think he's going to be able to handle being a starting pitcher long-term, I wouldn't move him. But that's just me.
All right, I'm hate to be boring here, but I'm in very similar camps as you. With Luis Robert, to a T, I could just spit it back out, and that would be my stance on it as well. Because what are we actually building here? Come on. Like you said, superstar ability. We've been devoid of that. If you want to be at that stage, like you said, 2026, so what we're really thinking here, you're going to have that control, at least for that 2 shots, right? So I'm right there with you. In terms of Garrett Crochet, I'm going to bring up another thing that you had mentioned in there. While it's a sexy option that, he's the best trade chip and all of this and that, it's also his first season in a starting rotation. And we thought we were seeing maybe a little dead arm period after those first 3 starts of the year, and we're wondering, is this going to be it? No, we fixed pitch mix, and that's all great and dandy. But even now, you already see the manipulation of the rotation to give him the time that you need for, having innings pile up with every inning he throws, setting a new career high. So would the trade package that you get back, if you were to ship off to Garrett Crochet at this deadline, be as lucrative as your armchair GM wants it to be? The answer is absolutely not, because there's too much uncertainty. The San Diego Padres, they're the ones that emerged with, the first team to put a name on it in terms of having interest. They're making that push for a wild card spot there. Are they going to be able to count on Garrett Crochet in mid to late September, given October? I don't know. Sure, it's great to have that control for him afterward that you'd also be trading for. So yes, that does help recoup some of the value. But if you're talking ace level stuff here, I would rather retain it instead of get a hampered return, so to say.
Yeah, that was one of the main points that I brought up in my piece. I've in the days following that, I've heard some things, just kind of through the grapevine, that there have been some, what I have been told, insane offers for him. Now, it's all relative. We know that, prospect evaluators and people that are very heavily invested into the prospect game have a tendency to overhype things. So what is fact and what is fiction? We ultimately don't know. But I just struggle to think that the return is going to be as great as people want it to be, knowing that you don't have any idea what Garrett Crochet is going to be in August, September, and October. And like you said very perfectly, yeah, you've got the additional years of 25 and 26, but a team trading for him is looking at the 2024 World Series here. And if you don't know what you're going to get out of him, how are you going to go and give the prospect capital that people want to see in a return for that when you don't have that level of certainty? I just don't get it.
Right. And I'd also, like to, eventually just get like, what was that offer? Because what are we going to do? Flip this young pitcher for more young pitching? And then, Steve, I'm ready to I can't wait to see what we get for Drew Thorpe and Jairo Iriarte and Noah Schultz and get those guys out of here because we got to start rebuild 4.0, right? Yeah. I'd have to see. I would need some position player talent in that. That would be a necessity in my mind. And like I said, I don't know which team is going to give up the caliber that would be acceptable in terms of A, Chris Getz's mind, and then B, for me as a fan looking at it, like shit, when are we actually going to get this thing on track and rolling here instead of just boosting our baseball prospectus and MLB pipeline farm system ranking? That only does you so much. See rebuild 2.0, right?
Yeah, that's 100% kind of where I'm at. I mean, the prospect rankings, they look great. They look sexy on paper. But at the end of the day, I think back on things and I think Dave Dombrowski is right. And there's a reason why he's going to the Hall of Fame and why the Phillies are the best team in the sport right now. Dave Dombrowski doesn't care about prospect rankings. He cares about superstars winning games at the major league level. That's why he's won multiple World Series as an executive, helping put teams together. And, we can go back in retrospect and think about, after what was it, in mid-2019 when the Ginger Sox got rid of him just a few short months after he helped put together a team that won the World Series, and he was available. And there was a big clamoring within this fan base about, you should go out and get Dave Dombrowski. At that point, the Sox still did have guys in the farm system, and they did still have young talent that had prospect pedigree to it. What would have happened if Dave Dombrowski would have been allowed to come in and admittedly tear the farm system to shreds, but do so to get quality major league talent?
Right.
We'll never know.
Yeah. Big what if. But yeah, I think it's, just kind of tempered the prospect hype, at least in my mind. And I feel like you're on that same track too here. All right, let's move on to our next item of business here. And that is John Schriffen. I feel like a weekly occurrence now talking about him here, but a couple of instances this week. We'll get to the Vote Maldi stuff in a second there, because that's a movement in and of itself. But the using of Hawks, you can put it on the board. Yes, call for Paul DeJong's home run on Saturday. I know he did put out a post on X afterward and said his nod to Hawk on the anniversary of Hawk Day, right? Back in, what was that, 2010, when they had it there on that June 8th. I don't know if I buy it, and your thoughts on him using it in that instance.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm buying that explanation entirely. Look, Hawk is the voice of my childhood. So, I mean, that's somebody that I hold in very high esteem. And he's always going to be the voice of the White Sox as far as I'm concerned. I wasn't crazy about it when I heard that. But in my opinion, that wasn't the most egregious thing that happened involving John Schriffen during the course of the game on Saturday. Again, I mean, I wasn't thrilled with him utilizing that and the explanation after the fact. Like, if he would have come out and would have said that, like, immediately following the Paul DeJong homer, maybe would have been a totally different scenario. But then to wait, and then the next day tweet it out, it's almost like, somebody like told him, hey, you should
Right.
probably say this because, the reaction's not very good online right now.
Right.
That's
And
how it came across.
that has been one of the criticism points, right? That he's not as locked into the lore, the history of the White Sox, right? So, like you said, it does after the fact kind of comes off of that. I was telling our guy Akins that I think it would have been fine on air, like you'd said, with a reference there. But you call it like Paul DeYoung now deep left, that's gone. His team leading 11th home run of the season, as Hawk would say, you can put it on the board, and then after that, as the fireworks go off, yada yada. Hawk Day was on this day, whatever, yada yada yada. If you do it, then I don't see it as much of a problem. I think you're still going to have people that are upset about it because there are certain people that will just, go ahead and break down any single, little thing it does. I know this is a more major occurrence there, but could have been framed better on the actual on-air broadcast. That's my thoughts on it. But we move on to the next instance, and this one was actually pretty hilarious. John Schriffen picked up on the hashtag Vote Maldi movement, Steve. And it was unironically that he was discussing this, even though it's definition of ironic for this movement that's going on here. Steve, I hope you're doing your civic duty 5 times a day. I've been on it ever since voting open on, what was that, Wednesday?
I am absolutely taking part in my civic duty, to make sure that you hashtag vote Maldi. It's very funny. I had a conversation with my dad earlier on in the week, a couple days ago after this thing really started, and I told him about this, and he found it very entertaining, in a season where there has not been a lot of entertainment with this team. He happened to agree with my assessment that this is really kind of the ultimate fuck you to Jerry Reinsdorf. Is if we as Sox fans can find a way to do this, to put on full display nationally that this is a guy that this organization brought in and thought was going to help kind of turn things around and change the culture, because that's a big thing, as we know, within the White Sox organization. If they can find a way to do this, that will really just front and center for the whole world to see just how inept this organization under Jerry Reinsdorf really is.
Right. And I just need because, it's hard to, like, you don't want to, if a guy makes it to the national broadcasters on Fox, I'm assuming that's what it'll be on. You got to tiptoe around a little bit because you can't just rip the guy to shreds on air. But essentially, the question is going to be then in millions of households in America is, why is this guy in the All-Star game? They're going to show his stats just like they do for everybody else, right? I think it'd be hilarious. I don't know if it'll actually happen. I mean, there's obviously, plenty of catchers. Unfortunately, Salvi Perez is one that's up there in some voting there. I don't know if it'll actually happen, but I support it. And I've been doing my part, grassroots movement, Steve, spreading the word via mouth and letting my Sox friends, family know that it's time to get out there and vote Maldi 5 times a day. So I've been doing my part on that front. And I will say, if you're opposed to this and you just, I can't even bring myself to do it, or I think it's like a dumb idea by the Sox fans here, you clearly learn nothing from Schooly McSchoolface. If there is ever an internet poll that is available to the public, it will be trolled. And that is what White Sox fans are doing here, because guess what? We're in a historically bad season. Laugh, live a little bit, have some fun with it. That's what we're doing here.
And again, I think that this is the ultimate way to go about giving a middle finger to this organization for making this acquisition, for one, and just putting this team in the state of disrepair that it is right now. There is no other way. Everybody, again, talks about the whole don't go to games, boycott games. That's not going to accomplish the objective that you want it to. If, for some reason, if Martin Maldonado steps into a batter's box in Arlington, Texas, in a month at the All-Star game, and you see that, 070 whatever batting average, there is no greater way to embarrass Jerry Reinsdorf in this organization than that. And I come back to this all the time. This is an organization and a fan base that we get a lot of flack from people, particularly on the other side of town, about how, we don't care about this team because, the attendance figures and everything. Remember this. This is a team that has won, or a fan base that has been able to help drive fan voting in the final vote of the All-Star game multiple times, getting Scott Podsednik selected. Getting AJ Pierzynski, a guy who was persona non grata across a huge portion of the league. They were able to get him voted onto the All-Star team. And it's happened in another number of other instances here. So when this fan base does get challenged, we do rise to the occasion, and this would be the ultimate if they could pull it off.
Yeah, it's good. It picked up some steam early on, so I kind of like just like put it out there as like kind of like a, like joke. Oh, I'm writing in Martin Maldonado, like haha, and then it we got picked up. So I'm looking forward to it, to seeing where we do. What I'm really looking forward to see. I don't know when they'll release this, but they usually do an update in terms of where the voting is and who has what at a certain point. So maybe a benchmark, and maybe not this upcoming week, but the next week after like 2 weeks of it are done. Then I believe there'd still be 2 more weeks after it available, or at least one. So I'm really looking forward to that update. We'll see how the hashtag Vote Maldi movement is doing then. All right, next order of business is prospect call-up time. Drew Thorpe is getting the call to the show. He's going to make his MLB debut coming straight up from Double-A. We'll start Tuesday against the Mariners. That's where the Sox are for the next 4 to begin this upcoming week. Thoughts on Thorpe coming up here? Is this a little premature? Is this, you have concerns about it? Are you excited? What's your vibe on this?
He's obviously pitched very well down in Double-A Birmingham. I think there's been a lot of press about just how well the pitching staff down there has done, leading the Southern League in just about every pitching category to this point. I mean, that team is in a position here to win the first half Southern League title, something that they haven't done in quite a long time. And they're doing it on the strength of that pitching staff, and Drew Thorpe has been a big part of that. I think he was the Double-A pitcher of the month for May. So the numbers are outstanding. Here's what I want to just say about this. Understanding what we went through with Rebuild 2.0 and all the prospect hype that surrounded guys. Remember, we're not far removed from having a farm system with 9 top 100 prospects. And a lot of them did not live up to the expectation at the major league level, or at least were uneven in their performances. So I think as a result of that, there is a high amount of skepticism within the fan base. Obviously, there's going to be people that follow White Sox prospects and provide content on it. And I think they're always going to be a little bit higher and more enthusiastic about things than just the average fan. And that's just, part of the business model that has to go along with it. And I understand that. But I think the fan base as a whole is more skeptical and more tempered in their enthusiasm with all of these prospects right now than they have been at any point in recent memory. And in spite of the success that Drew Thorpe has had, and the numbers are gaudy down at Double-A, but here's what it comes down to. Until we see it at the major league level here, I think most people are taking the approach of prospects are suspects. And that's just where we are.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I also just question, I would argue this, and this is probably not popular, because don't get me wrong, it's exciting when you see someone playing well, but performing well, and they get a promotion. I'm not trying to take away from that, but is this just out of necessity? Nick Nastrini walked everybody and their mother, resulting in another demotion, and Mike Clevenger's injury is going to keep him out a little bit longer than initially expected. Brad Keller's gone. We saw him pitch against us with the Red Sox, so there's no stopgap there. Jake Woodford just got lit up. This feels a little bit out of necessity, which is probably in the long run a bad strategy for development. Now, if he comes up and really shines and has a solid couple of outings to begin with, that would be great. But what if it goes sour? What if it goes the wrong way? And does that hinder confidence? Does it it's sent back down, whether that be to AAA or even back to Double-A, who knows? Does that derail a whole pitchers, like I said, their aura, their confidence there on that front? And would that, now say that would happen, worst case scenario plays out, are we going to look back on that as, was this a misstep, another misstep by White Sox player development? I don't want to be in that situation. I probably would have preferred a few AAA outings first, just in my opinion. I'll be tuned in. It'll be interesting to watch. But I really just hope for the best for him on that front, because I don't want to see another prospect go down in flames. It's happened too much.
I agree with a lot of that. I mean, at the end of the day, look, I want Drew Thorpe to come up and shove. I know a lot of people are looking at the prospect rankings here, and I think a lot of the top 100 lists have him somewhere in the 40s. Um, Again, the performance at Double A Birmingham and the performance overall over the last 2 seasons has been outstanding, but it's not at the major league level. We've seen enough guys in this organization light up the minor leagues, and then when they get that play in front of that third deck, all of a sudden it's a different game and they're not the same player. I don't want that for Drew Thorpe. I want Drew Thorpe to be awesome. It would be great, but you do have to wonder, why they are making this move right now instead of, our guy Besnick and his boy Tukey, who's, down in AAA Charlotte, and it seems like he's been throwing the ball okay of late, somebody that does have major league experience. Why are they going this route now? With Drew Thorpe instead of just going to another veteran guy that has experience at the big league level to fill in here. It is an interesting choice. I think with some of these pitchers in Double A, it wouldn't shock me if they have them skip AAA Charlotte just because of the extreme hitters environment that park is. But there's obviously, I think, going to be some value in being able to get to that AAA level and see guys that have played at the major leagues that maybe haven't been successful here. But again, it's going to be a different type of hitter than what you see in Double A. So I'm hoping for all the best for Drew Thorpe. I'm going to stay awake for as long as I can for this game out on the West Coast on Tuesday night here. But it is a little bit of an interesting decision, to say the least.
Yeah. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. Like I said, we aired our concerns. I just want to, like I said, it is still very exciting. Don't get me wrong. When you do see those numbers down there, that whole Birmingham staff is really throwing the ball effectively. And I would love to see that translate at the big league level. But Double A hitters are not major league hitters, even for a team that isn't offensive juggernaut like these Seattle Mariners are. So maybe that helps ease them in a little bit. I can only hope. We'll see what happens. That's Tuesday's matchup. We're running down the rest of the series out in Seattle for What's on Tap next, our usual segment at the end here. Monday, before that Drew Thorpe debut, will be Eric Fetty versus Logan Gilbert. That Tuesday, like we mentioned, Thorpe, Brian Wu going for the M's. Wednesday will be Jonathan Cannon, back in the rotation now, versus Bryce Miller. And Thursday, Garrett Crochet taking on Luis Castillo. Should be a good one. A lot of good pitching matchups here because that, like I said, the Mariners may not be a heavy hitting team, but they are a great pitching team, especially in that starting rotation. Will at least be very entertaining on that front. I don't know. I would like to see White Sox home run streaks continue here, but this may be one where it comes to an end, Steve. So thoughts on the series overall?
Yeah, that Mariners team, they really pitched the living shit out of the baseball. And so this is going to be a challenging series for our White Sox, a team that, well documented, not an offensive juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination here. So they're going to have their hands full with the Seattle Mariners pitching staff right here. So hopefully they are able to go out there and string together some quality at bats and put some runs on the board here. T-Mobile Park is one that historically does not favor the home run ball there. So for this Sox lineup, not necessarily the best place to be right now, but hopefully they can just scratch and claw and put together a couple of solid offensive performances right there, maybe steal a 2-1 victory. That would be nice here, but I'm not anticipating seeing a ton of offense in this 4-game stretch coming up.
Right. I'm right there with you, although I will say that we talk about T-Mobile Park out there in Seattle and it not being extremely hitter-friendly. So, you'd think fewer home runs and whatever, less run scoring. I do need to remind everybody that Noodle Boy did break through with his first home run of the season last year when they were out in Seattle. Just so odd. But it took until, once again, mid-June, right? But I know he has a couple already this year and he's not even in with his Achilles injury still on the shelf. But crazier things have happened. I'm just going to say that. Maybe Gavin Sheets gets a hold of one. Paul DeYoung, man, that guy. say what you want about him. Not a sexy signing by any means, but he is now up to 12 on the year to lead this team. So, and you also do have Mr. Luis Robert Jr. Back in the mix. He was in that home run derby that was out in Seattle. So maybe some familiar setting there. Blast some home runs there. So I'm looking at 1 win out of the series, Steve. That'll be my official prediction. Go ahead with yours.
I'm going to say they steal 1 on this. I don't feel great about that prediction, admittedly, just like I said, given the success and the overall performance of this Mariners pitching staff coming into this year. But it is really hard to get swept in a 4-game series, even though I am saying this knowing that I support a team that just went through a 14-game losing streak. But even still, it is really hard to do that.
I think it'd be a little bit different too if the Mariners were a little bit more, dangerous offensively. I think that changes the dynamics a little bit here because we've seen stretches of nice pitching for the Sox even get beat just because the offense can't produce enough on that end. So we'll see how it plays out. All these games are on West Coast time. It'll be 8:40 p.m. Central time. So get your coffee and stay up late and check in with us over on socials at Sox On Tap and at On Tap Sportsnet. We'll bring you updates, memes, jokes, highlights, all that good stuff. Steve, final thought, and then we got to get on out of here.
Final thought, they actually played, palatable baseball here for 3 out of 4 games in this Boston series. I know the loss today was very frustrating here, but, this was just an example of how bad teams lose a baseball game. It wasn't anything that, was that alarming. It's just, when you are short on talent, you find ways to lose games like this. They managed to win the 2 games in the middle of this series here, which is more than I thought that they were going to be able to accomplish. So I'll take that as a semi-positive.
All right. Mine, unfortunately, going to end on a negative thought. I was just thinking about it. I don't think I like, nor do I trust a single arm coming out of the White Sox bullpen. That's my thought after watching what has transpired over most of the course of that losing streak and even today on Sunday. So that does it for this episode of Sox on Tap. We appreciate everybody tuning in. This was White Soxing to a series split. Sox took 2 of 4 from the Boston Red Sox. We'll be back at you probably after that Seattle series, if not next week for a Sunday Funday. Appreciate everybody being in the comments here. You can do that by going and subscribing over on YouTube at On Tap Sportsnet there. Follow us on the socials at Sox on Tap and at On Tap Sportsnet, and check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Does it for this episode. Until next time, White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.